So much like we already talked about in the other video where we looked at underrated 80s movies, if you were to ask the average person if they liked 80s music, I feel like most people would say yes, and then tell you about how much they love Girls Just Wanna Have Fun and Take On Me and Oh Mickey, and all of those are great songs, I like them all, but there is so much more when it comes to 80s music. I mean, so much more. So today, we're gonna be taking a look at 15 underrated and forgotten songs from the 1980s. As you can imagine, there are countless underrated songs from the 1980s, so I could make hundreds of these videos and go on and on, but for today's video, I'm just gonna pick 15 somewhat random songs. These are 15 songs that I really love, that I feel are kind of underrated and sometimes forgotten. Of course, everyone's opinion is gonna be a little bit different. There's gonna be some people watching this video that are gonna say, those songs aren't underrated, those songs suck. I only listen to Motley Crue and Journey, and that's fine, but me personally, I grew up listening to all genres of 80s music, and this list is going to kind of reflect that. Also, I'm sure there's gonna be some people that watch this video that are gonna recognize every song on this list, but I have a feeling the majority of people that watch this are going to not recognize at least a couple of the songs, and probably a lot of the songs are gonna be ones that you forgot existed. All right, let's jump into this.
Number 15.
Breakout by Swing Out Sister. So good. Breakout was released in 1986 as the second single from their debut album, so Swing Out Sister had signed a 2-song deal with their record company, but their first single, Blue Mood, had failed to chart, and now their record company was telling them that they had just 1 week to produce the demo for their next single. So Swing Out Sister was kind of in a panic, they were stressing out, and they wrote Breakout pretty much out of desperation. They had to come up with a song. The lyrics were written by the lead singer, and she wrote them mainly about her experience with quitting her other job as a fashion designer, which was a lot more secure, and she quit that job to pursue being a singer. And what's really funny is, although this song was just written out of desperation, it ended up being their biggest hit, reaching number 4 in the UK, and in the United States, it rose in 1987 to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. This is one of those songs that for some reason, when I hear it, it makes me so happy and so sad at the same time. I mean, it makes me happy because it's such a good song, but there's certain parts of that song that when I hear it, it instantly brings me down and it makes me feel this deep and really sad nostalgia, and it takes me to a certain point in my life. Have any of you experienced that with a song, or am I just crazy?
Number 14.
Okay, there's gonna be at least a couple of songs on this list that I'm gonna kind of freak out about and say how they're one of the best songs ever written and they're one of my favorite songs, and this is definitely one of them. I Can Dream About You by Dan Hartman. It was originally part of the soundtrack for the movie Streets of Fire. I'm sure a lot of you already knew that. It was released in 1984 as a single from the soundtrack, and it was included on Dan Hartman's solo album, I Can Dream About You. So the story goes, Dan Hartman was approached and asked if he wanted to write a song for the movie, and the song was going to be performed by a fictional group named the Sorrells. Now, in the movie, the song is sung by a guy named Winston Ford. Supposedly, Hartman heard this version, thought it sounded great, and then went to the record company and was like, hold up, if you're gonna release this on the soundtrack or as a single, it's gotta be my vocals on it. And he fought with the record company and he ended up winning. So the version that you hear in the movie, that's sung by Winston Ford, but the version that's on the soundtrack or in the music video, or if you hear it on the radio, that's Dan Hartman. Now, sadly, Dan Hartman passed away in 1994. Although he was diagnosed with HIV, he actually passed away from a brain tumor and he was only 43 years old. Very sad, breaks my heart because I would absolutely love to see Dan Hartman at one of these 80s revival concerts performing I Can Dream About You, because it is just an amazing song. Now here's a fun little fact about Dan Hartman. A lot of people who know that song might think that he's just a one-hit wonder, but they don't know about the other songs that Hartman was involved in. He wrote Love Sensation, recorded by Lolita Holloway. And if you don't know that song, maybe you'll recognize it as a sample. He also was the co-writer of the James Brown song Living in America.
Living in America.
And this one I had no idea about, and it totally blew my mind. Dan Hartman was in the Edgar Winter Group, and he wrote Free Ride. Who knew? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people knew, but I had no idea.
Number 13.
Anyone who loves 80s music has to love the Go-Go's, just like I do, one of my favorite groups, but not as many people are familiar with Jane Wiedlin's solo stuff. Now, Jane Wiedlin, the guitarist for the Go-Go's, and my favorite Go-Go, she has, I believe, 4 albums with a lot of great songs, but my favorite has got to be the 1988 song Rush Hour. Now, Rush Hour is from her second album, and it's also her biggest hit, reaching number 9 on the US charts and number 12 on the UK single charts. Now, here's what's funny. I've seen the Go-Go's live probably half a dozen times or more, and they'll usually do a couple of songs from Belinda Carlisle's solo records, but I don't think I have ever seen them do a Jane Wiedlin song. What's up with that, Go-Go's? Get Rush Hour in the set list.
Number 12.
Me and Romeo ain't never been friends. Casanova by Levert. This song was released in 1987. It reached number 5 on the US charts and number 9 on the UK charts, and it was Levert's only top 10 on either chart. You might remember this song from the 1987 film The Pickup Artist, starring Molly Ringwald and Robert Downey Jr. It also appears on the soundtrack for Whoopi Goldberg's film Fatal Beauty. And this is one of those songs that I seem to never tire of. I can listen to it over and over again and love it just as much each time. I love cranking this song up when I'm cruising in my Suzuki. It's got such an awesome bass line, such a catchy chorus. It is such a great song and so underrated.
Number 11.
Let's talk for a minute about the group New Order. One of my favorites and also a massive 80s group. Of course, everybody loves the song Blue Monday, Bizarre Love Triangle, and of course, True Faith, which is probably it's probably my favorite New Order song, but New Order has got a lot of other great songs that are highly underrated, and I'm actually going to mention 2 for you right now. Let's start with Age of Consent. Age of Consent is part of the 1983 album Power, Corruption, and Lies. And you know what, honestly, I don't have a lot to say about this song. I just think it's a great song and underrated.
Number 10.
But this is going to be a 2-for-1. I'm actually going to give you another New Order song that I think is underrated. I'm talking about the 11th single released by New Order, Shell Shock. Shell Shock was released in 1986, originally released on the Pretty in Pink soundtrack 1 month prior to being released as a single. Now, Shell Shock was a massive dance club hit, but it only landed at number 26 on the US charts and number 28 on the UK charts. So despite being a fan favorite and a huge dance club hit, it still never saw the popularity that Blue Monday and Bizarre Love Triangle did.
Number 9.
Alright, so I mentioned that there was going to be at least a couple of songs on this list that I was going to kind of freak out about. This is another one, Something About You by Level 42. It's the only Level 42 song to have been a top 10 hit in the United States, where it peaked at number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. There's a lot of songs that I really, really love, but for some odd reason, I never explore the other songs and albums from that artist. I don't know why. It's a really bad habit that I have, and I'm really ashamed to admit this. Something About You is one of those songs. I really love it. I really love that song. I think it's one of the best songs written in the 1980s. Luckily, I finally explored the other songs on that album, World Machine, and it turns out the entire album is awesome. However, most of the other songs, or actually all of the other songs on the album, don't really sound like Something About You. The rest of the album has kind of a jazzy funk feel to it. Don't be like me. I'm sure no one else has that problem. Most normal people, if they like a song, they go to check out the artist's other songs. I don't know what my problem is.
Number 8.
Now talk about underrated and forgotten songs and artists. Oblivion by Aztec Camera. Oblivion is a song by the Scottish new wave band Aztec Camera. It's from their 1983 debut album Highland and Hard Rain. Now the first time around, the song didn't do that well. It was number 47 on the UK single charts in 1983, but a re-release of the song later that year proved to be more successful, where it entered the top 20 and peaked at number 18. Who knows why those things happen, really strange, but honestly, I think that song should have easily been in the top 10.
Number 7.
This one might be in competition with the last one for the most underrated and forgotten song. I'm talking about I Beg Your Pardon by Conan. I Beg Your Pardon is the debut single by the Canadian duo Conan. I had no idea they were Canadian. It's from their 1989 debut album, Move to Move. The song was a hit, reaching the top 20 in multiple countries, including number 5 in the UK and number 15 in the US. However, I feel like the majority of people do not remember this song. I was lucky enough to see Conan perform a few years back at the Lost 80s concert, and they opened the show and it seemed like no one knew who they were. There was probably a small handful of people that were standing up and singing along, but the majority of the people in the audience had no idea what was going on.
Number 6.
Let's talk for a minute about rap music. Now, I know rap music isn't for everybody, but you can't deny that it was a huge part of the 80s and the 90s. Although in the 80s, it wasn't really getting recognized, it wasn't getting any play on the radio, it was just barely getting played on MTV, and it was being ignored at all of the award shows. So therefore, there is a lot of really awesome rap music that is underrated because people just don't know it. Because of that, there's a couple of songs that I want to talk about, and I'm gonna start with a song by Sir Mix-a-Lot. A lot of people in the mainstream are familiar with Sir Mix-a-Lot because of
when a girl walks in with an itty bitty waist and a round thing in your face.
We all know that song. It was a massive hit, but what people don't realize is that is definitely not Sir Mix-a-Lot's best song. It's a great song, don't get me wrong, but it is definitely not his best song. Now for me, I think my favorite Sir Mix-a-Lot song is gonna be Posse on Broadway. Posse on Broadway is from Sir Mix-a-Lot's 1988 debut album, Swass, and the single is regarded as Mix-a-Lot's career breakthrough and the first golden age hip-hop record from outside the East Coast, West Coast, and Southern scenes to be nationally embraced. Now, I actually didn't know that there was a genre of music called the golden age of hip-hop, and it refers to rap music from the mid-80s to the mid-90s, which is the rap that I listen to the most. I just had no idea that it had its own name. It makes me feel really old.
Number 5.
I'm sure you all remember in 2020, the pandemic happened and we were all supposed to stay inside and everyone started discovering Zoom and doing live streams and stuff like that. And one DJ decided that he was going to start doing live streams to entertain everybody. He started going live whenever he wanted, and he would spin records for hours, and people would be at home dancing in their living rooms, and it became this huge internet sensation, and it was called Club Quarantine. And the DJ that I'm talking about is D-Nice. And once the pandemic started to ease up, D-Nice was all of a sudden appearing in the White House and on every talk show, and he was selling out the Hollywood Bowl, and he was a household name, and everybody loved D-Nice. But what a lot of people didn't realize was that in the 1980s, he was the DJ for a hip-hop group named Boogie Down Productions, and D-Nice actually put out a solo record in 1990. That's right, this song technically is not an 80s song, however it was recorded in 1989, so it still qualifies. And I'm talking about the song Call Me D-Nice.
My name is D-Nice, although I hate to admit it. Taking out your suckers and you don't know how I did it.
It didn't get any radio play, it was barely played on MTV, however, it was still a #1 hit on the hot rap song charts.
See, every episode remains in this mode. Very cool, very calm, there's no sweat in my palm.
Now this is making me wonder if that album is even harder to find now. I've had the cassette tape since 1990, but probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I wanted to get it on CD, and I went hunting for it, and it turned out that it was a really hard record to find. Obviously, it's out of print, and I had to do a lot of searching on eBay before I finally found a copy of it, and it wasn't too cheap.
Number 4.
Now here's another band that might be a top contender for the most forgotten band on this list. The song I'm talking about is Just Got Lucky by the band Joe Boxers. The song Just Got Lucky was released in 1983 as the second single from the British band. It hit the top 10 in the UK and the top 40 in the US. However, you just don't hear about it anymore.
Oh, yes, I found it.
And it's a great song.
Number 3.
How about Perfect Way by Scritti Politti? Perfect Way was released in 1985, and it was featured on their second album, and it was number 64 on the US year-end Billboard charts. Now here's the funny thing about this song and this band. When I first heard the name Scritti Politti, I thought they were like a metal band. I don't know why. Something about that name, Scritti Politti. To me, it sounded like a hair metal band or a hard rock band, something kind of along the lines of Skid Row. Then when I heard the song Perfect Way, I thought it was an R&B group. Then when I saw what Scritti Politti looked like, their look didn't match their name or the way the song sounded, which I think is awesome. I love stuff like that. When it, goes against the norm and, things don't match, I think it's great.
Number 2.
Flock of Seagulls, definitely a huge name in 80s music. Everybody is familiar with the song I Ran. And I think most people are also familiar with the song Space Age Love Song. And of course, everyone is familiar with The Hair. But a song that doesn't get as much attention as the previous two that I just mentioned is The More You Live, The More You Love.
Never give your heart to a stranger.
The More You Live, The More You Love was released in 1984, and it's the first single from their album, The Story of a Young Heart, and it was the band's last international hit.
The more you live, the more you love.
The song came in at number 26 on the UK charts and number 56 on the US charts. But honestly, in my opinion, I think this song is just a little bit better than I Ran.
The more you love, the more you grow.
Call me crazy, but that's my opinion.
Number 1.
I think if I'm going to talk about underrated songs from the 80s, I have to talk about Prince. And honestly, if I end up doing any more videos on this topic, I'm probably going to have to mention at least one Prince song in every video, because as some of you may know, Prince has thousands, and I mean thousands of songs. He has thousands of unreleased songs. Although Prince is timeless, his career spanned from the 70s pretty much up until now, because they're still releasing Prince songs. So although Prince is timeless, I would have to admit that probably his best songs came out in the 1980s, at least for me. A lot of my favorite Prince songs are from the 80s, so I could start this off by naming one of my favorite Prince songs, like When You Were Mine, or the Ballad of Dorothy Parker.
Dorothy was a waitress on the promenade.
But I'm actually gonna go in a different direction, and I'm gonna name a song off of his 1981 and fourth album, Controversy. The song I'm talking about is Private Joy. I mean, even the way the song starts with that quick drum roll and then right into the falsetto scream. Every time I hear it, it gets me dancing right away. Now, as I already mentioned, Private Joy is from the 1981 album Controversy. It was also the B-side to the single Do Me Baby. Oh, it was also the first time that Prince used the LM1 drum machine, which would become a massive part of the Prince sound. And like many other Prince songs, if you were to look up the musicians that played on the track, you're only gonna find one name. And not only is the intro to the song amazing, that little break at the end of the song, where he does this line, I don't know why, but there's something about that line, "You belong to Prince." It's so, he's just so cool. Now, Private Joy was also covered by the artist Cheyenne for the 1985 film Weird Science. It was also covered by LaToya Jackson in 1984, and she released it as a single in Japan. But honestly, both of those versions are just cheap carbon copies. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. All right, that is gonna do it for this list. That was kind of a long list, but honestly, there are so many more. So if you like this video, let me know in the comments and we will do another one. All right, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.